everybody, this is Steven Stradzian of Passive Wrappings, and today we're gonna be doing something a little different. Today I am in University Hall at Lesley University in Cambridge, and today is the first day of the Massachusetts Independent Comic Expo, MICE. And we've got over 200 artists here and writers, and we're gonna be going around, we're gonna be talking to them, we're gonna be learning their stories. So we're about to start here at this 9th annual independent comic event. So let's get moving before people really start filing in. All right, let's go! All right, so right now we're on the lower floor. We're here with Katie Skelly, who is a cartoonist, and I see that you have a number of comics here today. What kind of comics is it that you create?
I do mostly genre comics, so I do science fiction, horror, a little bit of everything, yeah.
So how long have you been working in this industry?
About 10 years.
And in that time, has your style changed at all, or the subject matter that you tend to work on?
I think it's gotten like more out there, and it's definitely like the drawing's gotten a lot better, so that's pretty good, so yeah.
So more elaborate, you would say, in terms of the illustration style?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Now I see here that you have it's a tarot deck that you've done.
Yes, yeah, I just did that. It just came out at the beginning of this month, so that's brand new. It's very cool. You should come down and buy it.
So this is a new thing. Have you gotten a lot of sellers on this one?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been going really good.
So what was your inspiration to want to do your own tarot deck?
Well, I've been reading tarot for a while now, so I really like the visuals of like the Rider-Waite, like classical tarot deck. But I just want to I've seen those illustrations so many times that I was like, I just want to do my own thing. So that's what I did. Yeah.
All right. And which one was your favorite one to do, if you have a favorite? I know there's a lot.
I would say my personal favorite is the Hierophant card, because it looks so different from like the original illustration, but like I really love these colors and I love this. Like I just like the black like negative space works really well, so that's what I like about this one. Yeah.
And would this be representative of the sort of illustration that you do also in your graphic work?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So now I'm here with Mark Reusch, and some of his work is behind us right now. So what kind of medium is this?
It's a combination of acrylic painting and some digital work.
So how long have you been doing this kind of work?
Probably 23 years or longer.
And you finally got a comic book out.
I finally did, yes. I have grown up with Tom and Matt here. They've been vendors at MICE in the past, making their own comic books. I've been a freelance illustrator for a long time, doing stuff for like the Coolidge Corner Theater and El Palone Taqueria and lots of Halloween-themed things, but I finally made my own comic book. It's called...
Yeah, let's take a look at this.
Sure. It's called The Home for Little Conjurers. I've read scary stories and watched horror movies my whole life, and you realize what you like and what you don't like, and how you kind of wish you could do things your own way. So, like, why not just make your own comic book of what you want to read?
So what did you want to read?
I wanted to read a story about a very scary house that is actually a few streets away from me. It exists in real life. And I came up with an idea of like supernatural things that happen around it. I don't want to give away any spoilers about it, but it's basically there are witches and supernatural things happening in current day Massachusetts. And it was kind of cathartic to make. Sometimes people do terrible things, and sometimes, like in my comic, there are consequences. People do terrible things to other people or mess with them, and sometimes there are witches involved, and it does not go well for people who are kind of terrible in real life.
So I just want to give people a better look at this, because your style really does carry over into the comic book here.
Thank you. It's drawn with Pilot parallel pens and then scanned in to Photoshop and colored digitally with a few different brushes. I found a printer in Michigan who would do 9x12 printing with a full bleed, My eyesight's terrible, so I wanted to make something big that you can really hold and examine without trying to squint at it. So it's a big comic.
So I'm here with Deanna and Celine, and some of their work is here in front of us, as you can see. Now let's start. I'm touching one of yours right now. What kind of work is it that you do?
I do romance and erotica.
So when you say erotica, what do you mean?
Explicit NC-17 pornography.
All right, I don't think I can show you guys any of that.
No.
But unfortunately, you also said that you do some fan artwork as well.
I love One Punch Man. It's my main fandom.
Oh no. And your work is?
My work is horror, romance, and erotica.
Horror this time. Now, is the horror and erotica, are they interconnected?
Yes, a little bit. I did a horror comic about postpartum depression and gaslighting. And there are some erotic parts in the beginning just to tell the story more fully. I also explore sort of edgier, kinkier subjects in my erotica works sometimes. So there's like a little fear to make it spicy.
Is anything like that follow up in One Punch Man, which is your work?
I mean, if you like taking cyborgs apart, and the Robo-Guro, I think, is pretty kinky.
So when it comes to all of this horror and this erotica, I'm wondering, how would you describe your art styles?
I'm definitely anime inspired. I started drawing comics because of Sailor Moon and Ranma Half, seeing those, so my art is very anime inspired.
And what would you say?
Well, I mean, it's hard to get away from the anime influence. We all kind of grew up with it. I don't think mine is as blatantly anime looking. It's got a lot more of the like 1940s style of sort of realistic cartoons, like
the advertisements in the 50s and 60s.
Yes, old magazine illustration, sort of the golden age of advertising. It's all kind of got like a bit of a retro feel to it.
And how long have you been writing this kind of work?
Well, I did my first horror comic last year when it was nominated for an Ignatz, and there's always been sort of an erotic element to my work, but this year I'm really going for it. I have an erotic zine that's here, and I'm working on a long-form romance erotica story that will be many volumes long.
And for you?
I've been drawing comics for about 20 years, since I was 11, and 2,000 pages of comics so far.
I want to thank you for having to talk to me today and telling us about the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, take care.
All right, and now we're here with Eric. And Eric, what kind of work do you have here today?
I make comics for kids, and they're actually for kids, not like everyone else says that they just made a comic and maybe a kid will read it. And it's called the Hero Machine, and what it does is it helps kids come up with their own superheroes. Here, I'll show you. This is the Hero Machine, huh? Mm-hmm. This is my first time at this show, so it's pretty great. There's tons of kids here, tons of customers. It's terrific.
So this is your first time at the show. How long have you been doing this kind of work?
I have been making comics my whole life, but I haven't been selling them. I guess I've been selling them for about 10 years, mostly in New York at other small shows.
So you say that your work is actually for kids.
Yes.
Do you find there's a lot of comics that are supposedly for kids but really don't fit that target demographic?
Yes, and I don't mean it as a slam, but parents find that they go into a comic book store and they buy a comic for their kids, and then they open it and it's just like a little too violent or a little too sexual or just a little too mature. So these are actually for kids. They're pretty innocent.
So what do you say is the target demographic of your comics?
This one is this one's early reader, so that's like a first comic. And then they kind of go up through middle grade, and so like, 6 up through 12. And then I like to say that this one is for any age, because that way I don't limit myself and my audience.
If they want to take a look at the machine that you built here, where do they go?
They can go to this website, impcomics.com, and the app is hidden on my website. Anyone can find it.
So now I'm here with Michelle Abreu. And Michelle, what work do you have for us here today?
I have my large project Novangard. It's a 4-chapter story that I've been working on for the past 2 years, probably.
What kind of style of work is it?
I love fantasy. That's my biggest thing. I want to do most stories about fantasy, but I guess in art style, it's a lot of line work. A lot of simple line work too.
This is the first chapter, so you're planning 4 chapters, and this just came out. This is your newest work, right?
Yeah, I finished it at the beginning of the year or around the summertime, and I'm now working on chapter 2.
So what is it about?
This story is about a possessed dead man who comes back from the dead to avenge his family, who's been killed by a lord that just wants the land for himself.
Now I see that you have some other things here for sale. Like, now what are these? These are stickers. Let's get some idea of the art style in there. And the mini comics, are these the only works you have that's in color? Are your other comics just black and white?
Yeah. Yes. I don't like to work much in color, but I'm starting to. So the first phase is my mini comics, and I was planning on doing this one, The Lamb of the Altar, in color, but I haven't decided whether to do it or not.
So how long have you been working on this kind of work?
I'm very new to comics, actually. I fell in love with comics about 3 years ago, taking a narrative class at school. And now that's all I want to do. Just want to do comics.
So I'm here with Alex Krokus, whose table is completely swamped right now.
It's true.
So what kind of work do you have over at your table right now?
I'm representing Doggo Studios, which is a project that crosses comics with animation. So in addition to having comics and prints and shirts, we're also showcasing a lot of GIFs and animations from different illustrators and artists from around the country.
So it's a more general sequential art press.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is cross the gap between animators and comic artists and try and have their talents mesh together. So I and my partner Crystal Downs are also working with comic artists to animate their work and use comic festivals like MICE as a showcase to kind of show people what we're all about.
So what is your background? What's the kind of work that you do the most?
I came from a background in illustration and started finding work as an animator, and now I'm a director with Crystal, but I also make comics for myself. I have a book published by Pyrite Press, which also has a table, and I'm just trying to find as many overlaps with these different media as I can.
So how long have you been doing this with the press?
Doggo Studios has just been around for about a year. We're really new. Our first project we did was animating Ben Passmore's Your Black Friend, which we put on YouTube and Facebook, and it moved around a lot. It has 2 million views. So our goal is to just find people who have good stories to tell and animate them, so people who aren't as deeply entrenched in the comics community have the ability to see them.
So how many artists are you working with right now?
Right now we're working with, if you're including the people who are making GIFs, probably about 20 to 30. In our next project, we'll be working with another comic artist probably later this year.
Do you want to tell us more about that project, or is it still too much in the works for you to give details on?
It's a little in the works, but it'll be good.
So now I'm here with James Mobius. James, how long have you been working in comics?
I've been drawing since I could hold a crayon. That's longer ago than I care to admit. And I remember drawing comics in grade school, like 2nd, 3rd grade maybe. But I've been publishing for a few years now. I used to do fanzine work in the 90s. Just in the last few years, I've actually started publishing original works.
So now that you're publishing original works, what kind of subject matter are you working on?
Well, my main book is this thing called Punk Rock Alien Space Girl Adventures, which is a science fiction story. It's kind of romance, and it's about a musician, and there's a subplot about a robot revolution. They don't really want to take over. They just want equal rights. It has to do with dreams. There's a lot of weird dream sequences in it, and the line between dreams and reality is going to start to blur a little bit, which is another subplot. And I put stories in there that are inspired by my own adventures as a musician. I have a degree from Berkeley, so I fix houses for a living.
So, how has your art style changed from the time that you were picking up crayons to the work that you're publishing now?
When I was 12, I got a book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which is a pretty good introductory book, especially there's a lot more books out there nowadays. That was a little bit of an influence. But really, I got interested in this, you're not going to see it on your camera, the Teen Titans, a book that was revived in 1980 by George Perez. And I was just really inspired by his art, so I spent a lot of time doing fan art, and I really learned a lot by copying this guy who's a master artist, also a very nice guy, I know him. That was just a really big influence, just analyzing, just by copying his work, I kind of was figuring out how to do it. And he was a self-taught artist also, but he, like a lot of good artists, will recommend that, you know, you shouldn't just, there was a big problem in the 90s that a lot of comic artists only learned how to draw by looking at comics, and that doesn't work. You really need to look at photographs and paintings and real people, real life, to be a well-rounded artist. You know, otherwise you're going to end up just not understanding anatomy. I mean, if you don't care, that's your own thing, I guess. But I'm kind of a realist, somewhat. I aim for that. I do portraiture as well. If I had the time, I would pose people for every panel and do photorealistic comics, but it's way too time consuming, so I just I do the best I can.
Those are some great points. Thank you for sharing that today.
You're very welcome.
So now I'm here with Magda Boreysza. And what kind of work are you showing here today?
I'm showing my own work, which is a bunch of illustrations of humans turning into animals, mostly.
And what kind of medium do you work in here?
I draw with fine liners, and then I create prints from that.
And how long have you been doing this kind of work?
Well, I've been drawing since I was a kid, but I started making comics about 10 years ago.
So what here is some of your newest work that you'd be showing today?
This is one of my, well, this is my newest book, and it contains drawings that I was making for about 2 years. And I put them together into a story, basically. So it's like an experimental comic.
So when you began, you hadn't planned for this to be a story, and you retroactively made it a storybook?
No, I don't really plan out my stories. I improvise a lot, so I just kind of sit down and I start drawing and I see what comes out. So I started making all these drawings, and I could tell that they were telling some kind of a story, and then retroactively I sort of ordered them, and then I made more drawings that would fill in the gaps, and so it became a narrative eventually, but it wasn't planned.
All right, so that's interesting. You start with sort of key illustrations, and then from there you develop the story afterwards.
Yeah, I don't like to plan. I feel like I make my best work when I just start drawing and I see what comes out. But I have certain themes that tend to come out, and those are going back to nature, transformation, feral humans, like finding the animal inside yourself. Yeah.
All right, this is like some dark mountain project stuff going on here. All right, so I see you also have some postcards as well.
Yes, I have a lot of postcards.
Have you doing the postcards for a while, or are those newer things that you're doing?
No, the postcards I actually printed a long time ago, and they're just various drawings that I made. Yeah, they're quite old at this point, but they're the kind of creatures that come back in my stories a lot.
All right, I want to thank you for sharing your work today and letting us know about your interesting writing style. And now I'm here with
Megan Stanton.
And Megan, what do you have for us today?
So today I have brought my 5 finished comics of a 6-part series called Lost Cats. It's like a supernatural suspense gumshoes story, but additionally there are some human interest things, people dealing with mental illness, loss, etc. So like there's a little bit of some spooky supernatural stuff, but also some real human story stuff.
So how long have you been working on this series?
I've been working on this series for 2.5 years now.
And so you're at part 5 now. When will the series be complete?
Hopefully very soon. Could be done in the next 2-3 months. I would like to get it done before the new year.
Is this the first series that you've worked on?
It is the first series. I have done other short and also longer stories. The longest thing I've done was a 90-page story, but that was just all in one go. It wasn't broken down into parts.
And next to the table we got
Chad Bilyeu.
Chad, what are you working on here today?
I'm selling this comic book. It's called Chad in Amsterdam. It's based on my life in Amsterdam.
This is autobiographical then?
Yup, autobiographical. And
so there's no liberties taken here. This is, you say, autobiographical as
all about it. And speaking of liberty, I'm in probably the most liberal city in the world, Amsterdam. Smoke sun, you know, it's a great place. And I go a little below the tropes in the comic. So,
how long have you been working on comics?
Really, this year. It's a new thing, but I read a lot of comics growing up my whole life. So, I had a story to tell, and I thought this would be the best format to do it. Most entertaining format.
So why did you think that?
I don't know. I just thought like writing a book about being some immigrant's a little pretentious, and then I didn't want to do video or nothing, and I just love comics, so I thought, yeah, let's go for the comic. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. Thanks for sharing it with us here today.
Thank you, man.
And next to the table, we have
Marguerite Dabaie.
And what does he have for us here today?
So my comic is called The Hookah Girl and Other True Stories. It's an autobiography about Palestinian Americans.
Why is it you decided to do a comic?
I've been a cartoonist for quite a while, and it's just the medium that I feel the most comfortable in. I mean, honestly, I could write. It would be easier, I guess, to write. I mean, I'm already writing anyway, but I just feel much more comfortable drawing and writing. I feel like I'm telling my story better if I'm drawing and writing. So, yeah.
So when you say quite a while, how long exactly have you been a cartoonist?
Since 2006. I don't know. Math. Since 2006, so it's been a while. So
that's it, folks. You see, these artists, they don't know math, but they know how to draw, and that's how they tell their life stories.
I mean, what can I say? Some stereotypes are a little bit true, and but my heart's in the right place. I love art. I love being able to draw, and I love being able to be here and be able to create the work. So.
Now I've got Benjamin Korsh, and he's got something interesting here.
should I talk about these? Go ahead. So I have 4 musical comics. 4 musical comics. You can read them by flipping through, and then when you would like to read the music, you just open it up. So you really get a comic and a song. It's a great deal.
So what made you think of this concept of combining sheet music with the graphic images of the comics here?
I'm also a musical composer. I wanted to do both. So I also wanted to collaborate with friends. So I write some of the music myself. I also have friends write the music. It's just a great way to get people involved and to make the comics more dynamic.
So how long have you been combining these two together?
These are all new. They're all about within the last year. Printed them recently, so I've been doing comics for about 2 years, so fairly new.
I see you have a free poster here as well. So what is the story behind this free poster that you're giving out?
I have a new Instagram comic, and I printed a free poster because it didn't make sense to sell something that was already free. So it just gets people caught up. There's more online, and just get the word out.
Really, thank you for introducing me to this work here and to all the viewers at home, because I've never seen anyone do that before, so it's pretty interesting. So now I'm here with Joe Botsch, and what work do you have here today with you?
I have my comics. They're short, spooky stories. Some of them are kind of traditional horror. Some of them are a little bit more on the funny or twisted side. They're all self-contained shorts.
And how long have you been making these shorts?
I've been making these for, I guess, maybe 5 years, give or take. Sometime probably a few a year, I'd say.
Now, they have a real sort of, just looking at them, horror zine kind of quality to them.
Yeah.
So what is the subject matter that you focus on in them?
I kind of like the absurdity of horror for the most part, so a lot of them have kind of a traditional kind of a fear of the unknown sort of Lovecraftian sort of thing, but I like to kind of add a little bit of like a sense of humor or irony to them to make it sort of to cut the edge a little bit. I like horror, but I also kind of like when it makes fun of itself, and I think the nature of reading horror sometimes is to kind of make the world less scary. So I think that having these stories that have kind of an ironic or a twist or a humorous aspect sort of helps make our day-to-day lives a little bit less scary.
Well, thank you for giving us a look at your work here today and trying to make the world less scary, I suppose, through horror. All right, so now I'm here with artist Marguerite Sweeney and Eros Livieratos. And how are you doing here today?
Oh, doing so well. Thank you so much. Doing really great. It's been a great turnout so far.
So you two are a team who works on these comics here. You are in fact the artist, and you are the writer.
Mostly.
So how does your writing process work?
A lot of crying. It's a lot of. I look through more traditional scripts of like film scripts and those sorts of things, and then try and convert whatever story I have into that format so it's as easy as possible for her to illustrate it. And lately it's been a lot more collaborative. Well, we live together, so we talk more through the process and try and figure out how we want scenes done and that sort of thing.
So he consults you pretty early off in his writing process?
Yeah, I mean, he'll give me the script and I'll immediately be like, I don't know what you mean, or how do you want this done? And then through that it might stay the same or it might change. This third issue that we debuted here is very much a collective project. I had as much input as he did, and it's very exciting.
So what is the subject matter of the work?
A lot of the time it's sort of like slice of life, everyday problems, those sorts of things. Our newest issue is about the New Jersey punk scene, so I play in bands locally, and it's a lot of like how people interact in that sort of setting and how people get through the day, really. But yeah.
So how long have you been working as an artist?
Well, I graduated from illustration at Moore College of Art about 2 years ago, but I've been doing art probably about for 7 years straight since before college and then my work after.
And has your style changed at all over that time period?
Yeah, when I first started drawing, I thought I was going to be a concept artist and do video game art, and I found that to be really rigid for me, and I wanted something more illustrative, so I studied illustration and pursued comics at the same time, and now I do both, illustration and comics.
So what is some of the new work they have here today?
So we're debuting issue 3 of Interrupt Comics, as well as I'm really happy Maria put out her first autobio book, Brittle Joints, which is autobiographical stories about living with her disability, and it's really fantastic.
Thank you.
It won the mini grant award here, and this is sort of about the punk scene and all that fun stuff.
Now I'm here with Declan, and what work do you have with here, Declan?
So today I brought Blair Witch. It's my latest comic. It's about a woman cursed by ghosts and a YouTube ghost hunter who kind of gets mixed up in her world.
So how long have you been working on this particular story?
This comic I've maybe been working on and off for 2 years, so it's exciting to finally get it finished and out there.
How long have you been working on comics in general?
Yeah, probably a freshman year of college. I had a wonderful mentor who was all about just like DIY, going to like Kinko's, printing it, off of the fax machines. Like he was making, originals and shrinking them down just on the Xerox machine. So that was super inspirational. And yeah, ever since then I've been making comics.
Yeah, because I noticed there's kind of a zine quality to your work, and that's very purposeful then.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely referencing underground comics, and definitely that like the artist has gotten their hands on the work,
It has to be pretty difficult to illustrate the comics with mouse hands that you've been cursed with.
It's true. Well, it's the blood moon is full, so I have been transformed into a mouse. Usually I've tactile little human hands, but it's unfortunate. It happened during mice, which is kind of cool, but what can you do?
This is what happens, folks. This is what happens in October to the artists who are trying to bring you their work. So now I'm here with Richie, and Richie, what do you got for us here?
Hey, so I have a comic called That Box We Sit On. It's the Ignatz Award winner this year for Best Outstanding Comic or Outstanding Artist. So I have that. I have a couple pins, some postcards with some of my illustration work on it. So yeah, a bunch of different stuff, a bunch of different work.
So what kind of medium do you work in as an artist?
It's mostly digital. So I kind of started with graphite and gouache, ink, but now it's mostly like digital art. So I do a lot of iPad drawings, but also like Wacom, like Photoshop stuff.
How long have you been working in that medium?
I've probably been drawing digital since I was like 17, so it's maybe been like 15 years now. But professionally, I've been doing it for maybe like around 6 years. So it's just been like a constant like getting better, like getting more used to it. So yeah.
Well, congratulations on winning your award this year. It was this year, right?
Yeah, it was this year. It was at SPX. Yeah.
And so I saw that you had these pins here, which have been selling really well today.
Yeah.
These are illustrator work, right?
Yeah. So they're like original designs, kind of based on like a rap song. And so I sort of like took some of the lyrics and like designed it, and then kind of ordered pins. And then it came out like that. Yeah.
So what's the subject matter of the stuff that you're writing?
A lot of like magical realism stuff. So I'm like a big fan of like David Lynch and like Haruki Murakami, like the '90s show Pete and Pete, like this like TV show. There's a lot of like things I don't necessarily explain, but they're kind of weird and surreal. Almost more like heightened nostalgia in a way. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for showing us your work here today, and I look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
So now I'm here with Laurel, and Laurel, what work have you brought with you here today?
Well, I've brought a number of different comics. I have several science fiction series, my Deep Forest series, and a suspension short. And I also have my Polymorphous series of comics that are sort of semi-autobiographical, fantastical stories about a little shapeshifter dealing with emotions and mental illness.
So what made you think to do that kind of autobiographical work?
Well, actually, I usually don't do autobiographical comics, but I started doing little stories about this creature, Polymorphus, and it kind of struck me after I had started them that there was a lot that was pretty directly just sort of about me, and I found that like making this character kind of like cute and silly actually helped me sort of get out of some darker ideas and issues because I can feel a lot of compassion for this little character and enjoyment in drawing her that I don't get just from like, you know, going through those things myself. I'm often very self-critical, you know.
So how long have you been working on that series?
Well, that series is about 3 or 4 years now, I think. And I've been doing comics now for over a decade, just overall.
And what medium do you tend to work in with this?
Well, my sci-fi stories are mostly all in color with watercolors or digital color, but the Polymorphous series, I was sort of switching things up and doing pencil. Instead of using inks or really, I didn't really want anything that was that polished because part of the positive experience of doing them is sort of like trying not to judge too much what you're doing. So I like having that contrast of some series that I really take a long time to work on and polish, and then other ones that I'm a little like more free with, can sort of go back and forth between the two.
Well, thank you for talking to us today, and I'm gonna, I guess by looking at this work, you can figure out how shape-shifting works. So thanks so much.
How to. So great to meet you. Thank you.
Now I'm here with Holly Foltz, who is some sort of vampire or something from her work, I'm going to guess.
Oh, I wish. Just in the comics, I'm afraid. But yes, there's a lot of vampires in my work.
So why don't you tell us a bit about your work, which I've noticed a certain theme to.
Yes, well, you know, it's the kind of work that I look for when I go to conventions. I really like vampires and queer content, and you know, I don't always find what I'm looking for, so I'm like, screw it, I'll just make my own.
So this was an issue of you not being able to find the things that you wanted to read.
Pretty much. I'm like, well, if I can't find it, maybe I'll just write it myself, and you know, it seems to be going over well, so I'm glad I did. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I look for when I go to conventions, so I figured I'd just put it right out there, what I've got.
And how long have you been making it yourself?
I've been making my own comics for probably about 10 years. You know, I've been drawing little comics my whole life, but in terms of packaging them and putting them to a form that I can sell, probably about 10 years.
So what is some of the latest work that you've done?
The latest work would be the 6th issue of my series Unpleasant People, which is not about vampires, but is fun nonetheless, and my gay vampire comic, Suck It Up, pun intended.
So Unpleasant People, is that sounds like a collection of short stories or something like that?
It is a longer story, actually. Okay. It's a workplace comedy about supervillains. I really like sort of really terrible sword and sorcery movies, and so it's kind of about a villain from that kind of context who's really bad at his job and has to hire a secretary, and hijinks ensue. So again, the kind of content that I would want to read.
All right, well, thank you for letting us take a look at your work here today, and that was... I didn't see that as what the subject matter was going to be. That sounds really interesting.
Thank you. I hope other people find it interesting too.
So now I'm here with Bitmap Prager, and you are working on Aspen Princess?
Yes, I'm working on the Aspen Princess. It's a comic about the gay space future and follows a small queer owl girl as she escapes the Earth cult she was raised in 1,000,000 years in the future.
So this is autobiographical then, of course. So what made you start working on this? What was your inspiration?
Well, I started it in November of 2016. I was making sad comics about how I was afraid the future was going to be bad, and then when the election results came in, I decided actually I would really like to make something that was like a bright and positive queer future that was about found families, and there's punching Nazis in it. She joins the theater. It's very much I wanted something that was almost like a safe space to feel or explore, or just something that felt good to like read now.
And were you working on comics before this one?
Oh yeah, before this I worked on a comic called Ash Skies, which was much more about, again, my fears for the future, and before that I was working on a comic called To Catch a Dream Eater, which was, well, that one was in fact actually semi-autobio. I just mixed around the names and places, and sometimes things were more metaphors for things that actually happened to me, and that was much more about being a struggling artist and being queer, and that's, yes.
So what is the medium that you're working in with this?
I work digitally in Photoshop. Most of my textures in my work come from physical objects that I then change the hue and color of. But yeah, everything is made in Photoshop.
So now we're here with Marika McCoola, and what work have you brought today?
So I brought my kids' comic Baba Yaga's Assistant, which I wrote and was illustrated by Emily Carroll, which is about the witch from Russian folklore. And I also brought my series of adult online dating memoir comics, which take place in the greater Boston area. And then I also have a couple zines, including some 3D printing and some coloring books as well.
All right, so you're ranging in subject matter a bit here. So tell us first about the Baba Yaga.
So I have an MFA in writing for children, and so I really love retelling folktales. It's something I grew up with. And the Baba Yaga stories are great in that it's a witch who rewards young women who are clever, which you don't find a lot. And so I was really drawn to that. And so I wrote the book on that, but felt that my style wasn't right for it. And so I ended up having someone else illustrate it, which ended up being Emily Carroll, who was great to work with. And I've since written other books that are still have not yet been announced that are going to be illustrated by other people. But I'm also trained as an illustrator, and some of my own work I feel like I should illustrate. And so that's where the three-dimensional comes in, and also where the dating comics come in. It was my way of sort of dealing with that when I entered it this year.
When it comes to what is appropriate for your style, let's talk about the dating comic. What made you want to produce that?
So the best way to go out on a date was to say, well, if this date isn't good in terms of I don't like the person, well, at least it'll make a good comic. And I started finding that my friends were really reacting to them, so I started making more. And it was just a great way of viewing every date as more of an opportunity of like, this could be an interesting person or it could be an interesting comic. And so either way, this is going to be fun. And I had a really great time doing them. And also, it helps you pay more attention when you're there to the nuance of body language and what people are saying and remembering those stories.
Now, when it comes to the 3D printing, would you mind explaining a bit more what that means?
Sure. So the 3D stuff is I physically make the models, I light them, I photograph them, and then minimal photoshopping. And so it's a bit making dolls or puppets. And to me, that's very much what I was doing as a child, is I made dolls and I made small toys and food and clothes for my dolls. And it's a way of kind of going back there. And I find that people react to them for that reason of like, oh, this is like something I want to manipulate. It has this physicality to it that you tend to lack a lot when you become an adult and you're interacting with things.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation. It was great to talk to you today, and I hope that you do really well here.
Thank you.
Now I'm sitting down with Brendan Tobin, and you've got some comics with you here today?
I do. I got a lot of comics here today. What would you like to see?
Well, what is the latest thing that you've worked on?
All right, the latest thing, because it's October, is Murder Guy. It's a mini comic over here, and it's kind of a play on the slasher, supernatural killer, and, you know, teenage hijink kind of trope. So
how long have you been working on comics?
Forever. Ever since I was a kid, I drew and would put together little comics, and let's see, I'm 42 now, so just about 42 years.
Now, you have a collection of both the miniature and the full-size comics. Now, do you have a preference in terms of which you prefer doing?
The minis are fun because it's kind of a one-shot. You can just bang them out and, have a few of them. I do like working in the longer form. It's just, it takes a while, and, my interests kind of wander. So the minis are fun, just if, it's a small burst of getting something done. So
in terms of your interest, what kind of style do you like to draw in?
My stuff is really cartoony now. A lot of kind of matte graining influenced, comic strippy, Hanna-Barbera type deal. But I switch it up. I can work in several styles, but that's the style I prefer, a really cartoony kind of animated look.
So in terms of subject matter, do you like to try and get a broad audience?
I do. I'm a little twisted, so everything's kind of on a dark edge, but without crossing the edge. But, I like Bigfoot, I like hobos, robots, superheroes, all sorts of stuff. So I try to appeal, yes, to a wider audience. And if you're a little tapped in the head, even better. So.
Sounds like good stuff. Well, thank you for showing us your work here today.
Thank you so
Really
much.
appreciate looking at it.
All right. Thank you.
So now I'm here with Hal, and he seems to have a number of different types of printmaking work here. Is that correct?
Yep. I am really into printmaking. I tried to major in it in college, but I took an illustration major path, so kind of tried to fit it in. Didn't get all of it in. I primarily work in screen print, lithography, and woodcut and relief. So that's what I'm into.
So what was it about printmaking that made you lean on that, even though you ended up majoring in illustration?
I think something about it is really refreshing compared to a lot of the digital work that I end up doing as an illustrator, just because it's just so involved, and the process, just, you have to focus while you're doing it, and you can get some really interesting effects the more you kind of tamper and experiment. I just couldn't get that from classic drawing and Photoshop work, so I really like that.
Now, which method do you enjoy doing the most?
I think woodcut and screen print are tied for my favorite. Screen print is a little bit more accessible and a little bit faster. Woodcut is nice because the actual carving process is really satisfying. I'd say they're tied. Yeah, I can take woodcut home with me. I can't really take screen print home with me, so I kind of need a studio. But yeah, I would still say that they're tied.
Well, woodcut's a lot more labor intensive.
I would argue that it isn't. It depends on the wood that you're using. So when I was using plywood birch for the big floral print that I have, that was a lot more labor intensive. But if you're using pine or a softer linoleum, it's pretty easy. It's pretty fast and immediate. It didn't take me very long to carve most of my bird prints that I have.
So tell us more about the zine that you have here today.
Sure. Infernal Outfitters is a zine that I made in college in my freshman year. It's a zine where the concept is kind of I wanted to do Urban Outfitters models as demons, just because I thought the aesthetic would be really nice. And kind of just sparsed out between it is Aleister Crowley's poem Hymn to Lucifer. I just thought it would be edgy, which, some people are into that. The punk scener's pretty into it.
Well, Aleister Crowley is actually one of my favorite poets, so thank you so much for showing us your work here today.
No problem.
So now I'm here with Grace Abe, and Grace, what kind of work do you do?
Well, I've just started out. I started out with illustrations, and I've slowly moved on to black and white comics. And my latest one is about family. It's about my grandpa's house in Japan.
So this is somewhat true to life, or entirely true to life. What made you want to do that kind of work?
Yeah, sure. Specifically for my latest one, it's called Grandpa's House. Pretty much because I went on Google Maps one day and I was looking for literally my grandpa's house in Japan, and realized that the street was so small that Google didn't have it. And I was messaging my mom like, hey, do we have anything left of grandpa's house? Because he had passed away a couple of months before. And that's kind of where it started, where I just started looking for photographs of his house and just trying to document it in some way, and it kind of rolled into a very short comic.
So this comic's almost like a memoir of sorts.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's my very first one, so.
So how long before you were doing this comic, how long were you doing illustration in general?
Well, I've always liked drawing, but I think since graduating college, I've been pretty much drawing a little bit more consistently. I work as an art director at an ad agency, so that also like helps me with my like art skills as well. So
you've been doing it since college. Is that what you studied in college?
No, I was actually an English major, but I did take some classes at the art school across the street, so that counts, right?
I think so. Would you say that being an English major actually helped you in the writing of this comic?
I would say yes. Yeah, I majored in nonfiction, which also includes memoir, so definitely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this memoir of sorts with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much.
So now I got a chance to sit down with Curtis and Drew. And what is the name of your project?
It's called The Legend of Beardfist.
This is amazing. Please tell me, what is The Legend of Beardfist?
The Legend of Beardfist tells the story of Ophelia. She's a young girl, and she travels with two kind of like surrogate dad guardians that she meets, Beardfist and Chap. And from them, she learns about inner strength and how to become a powerful hero, and morality and so on in a land of fantasy and magic. So it's a coming-of-age story that's set in a land of fantasy and kind of like a Celtic background.
So, what is the role of each one of you in this project?
I write The Legend of Beardfist.
And I illustrate it.
So, what is the, how early are you as an illustrator involved in the process of the creation?
Oh, from like the get-go. Like I'm illustrating it as we're writing it, and so they happen almost like simultaneously. And sometimes, you know, the writing will inspires the illustrations, but then sometimes also the illustrations will inspire how the story evolves.
So you two are working very closely together when you're producing this work. So what initially inspired you to want to make this story?
Well, it's kind of a character that Drew had for a while, and it really evolved by us collaborating and creating the world that Beardfist inhabits, and along with Ophelia and Chap, and it evolved into it being a story about Ophelia's background and how she met Beardfist and how that came to be.
That's pretty much the whole thing. I got nothing to add.
So how long have you two been working on The Legend of Beardfist?
2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, about 2 years, yeah.
Yep. And what's been the reception here today?
I think people love it. You know, we're really selling the books that we have. People are asking about the next issue, you know, so we're taking pre-orders and everything. Like it's being very well received.
It's incredible. Somebody stopped by and got the issues and said, like, this is my new favorite superhero.
So is this a project that you guys want to run for a long time, or do you have a definite end where you know where you're going with the story?
Well, right now we're writing our first character arc is like eight issues long, or it'll be like 8 chapters in like a first volume of a trade paperback. So that's the first arc, and then from there it's going to kind of develop into other things. So right now this first story in Beardfist is like going to be like 8 chapters.
So in terms of the art style, how would you describe the work that you're doing?
I mean, I grew up drawing a lot of fan art, my favorite cartoons, and so, I mean, things like Danny Phantom and Adventure Time sort of influenced my my creative inspirations.
Is it a digital medium?
Yeah, I do all the line art by hand, and then I'll scan it into the computer and color it in Photoshop.
I'm glad that I'm here to see you at such an early stage of your work because you're still in the first story arc. Is that correct?
Oh,
what you
yes.
said?
Yes. Right now, so we have the first 2 issues. It's that comprise the first act of, like I said, a larger story. So yeah, we're in the early stages and having fun seeing where ultimately our characters are going to tell us where it goes.
Now, have either one of you worked on comics before The Legend of Beardfist?
I've written a couple kind of original things, spec scripts and things like that, but never actually a fully published comic like Beardfist.
For you?
Same thing. I've never worked on like a professional comic, but it's hard to be an artsy kid growing up without drawing a few like just random comics in your school papers and stuff, you know.
All right, well, thank you for sitting down with me today and telling me about your work.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad to get to see it.
Thank you for having us on your show. Thank you so much.
So I'm here now with Rachel Lindsay, and she has a memoir of sorts with her today.
Yes, I do. It's RX, graphic memoir. It just came out September 4th.
So what is it about?
It's about I'm bipolar, and when I graduated from college, I had to get a job that had health insurance. So I took a job in advertising, and I ended up being promoted onto the Pfizer account and developing ads for antidepressants as a closeted mental patient. And being inside the machine like that made me reflect on my life and the choices that I had made, and I decided that I needed to leave, and I became manic, and then when I quit my job, my parents involuntarily hospitalized me. So it's a story about a young person dealing with mental illness in America, and the healthcare system here, and the commodification of mental illness by psychopharmaceutical companies and their advertising partners, and just the broken system that addresses mental illness.
Now that's a very heavy personal story. What made you choose this medium to tell that story?
I'm a cartoonist.
And how long have you been a cartoonist?
My whole life.
With this work, what sort of time span does this story take place over? I'm wondering, because you gave us an idea of what the actual story was.
The story spans about 6 months, 8 months, and then I made a promise to myself when I was in the psych ER that I would make this book, and that was in 2011. So it's taken me 7 years to get to publication, and when I got my book deal, it took me about 2 years and 1,800 hours to do it, soup to nuts, all hand lettered, all hand drawn.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us a chance to look at your work here today, and I really appreciate you, sharing this story with us.
Yeah, thanks for the chance to chat, and thank you, whoever is watching, buy my book.
So that was the end of the first day here at MICE, and I'm here with Zach Clemente, and he's an organizer of the event.
That's right. So, yeah, it's been an amazing show. It always starts a little slow, in my opinion. We start at 10 a.m. It's like a college town area, but it was packed from the beginning. Like, it was just a swarm of people, and it was really, really nice, and it stayed really good. And, like, I talked to a bunch of people towards the end. I try to check out with people in various parts of the show to make sure sales were good, and they had people at their table, and they got conversations, and everyone overwhelmingly had a really good time. And I know we have a positive, good, well-respected show, but it's always nice to hear it, and I always want to double-check that is indeed the case with as many people as I can during the show. Like, it's been really good. It's been really, really good. Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say has been difficult about filming this show is actually moving through the crowds of people. There's been so many people here today.
Yeah, it gets really busy now. It feels like a couple years ago, people weren't sitting in corners and stuff like they do at like other shows and stuff. But like this last year and this year, you see a lot more people like sitting in the lobby and the hallways and like, taking up space in ways that I haven't normally seen at like indie comic shows necessarily and festivals. So that feels really good. Like the audience is sticking around, they're hanging around. They want to read the books, they want to buy the books, they want to go to the workshops and the panels and see the live drawings. They're here for all of the stuff we're doing, as opposed to sort of doing a 2 or 3 hour round. It's really great. It's a great feeling to see how busy it gets, even if it is a little daunting at times.
And so, if people want to check your website, it is
MICE Expo, MICEXPO.org. You can find us on Twitter at MassMice, or on Facebook as the Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo.
This is Steven Sarajian for Passive Wrappings, and if you need to get in contact with me, contact me at contact@fireintheminddesign.com with any sort of feedback that you have, or if you have information that you want from MICE, go ahead and contact them at their given locations.